I think it's appropriate to say a few things about loops. When you're developing the model, I said you want to use um, non-directional noun or noun phrases for the elements. And when you make the connections, you always ask the same question. If A increases, what happens to B? Depending upon whether B increases or decreases, you can identify the connection is either adds to, same, or subtracts from, opposite. And you end up with these situations where, take a savings account, for example. Assuming that the interest rate stays the same, if you increase principal, the interest increases. If you decrease the principal, the interest decreases. Whereas if you increase interest, the principal increases. If you decrease the interest, the principal still increases, which is why you'll notice that I've labeled this connection as the same, and this connection adds to, while they're still both the same color. The thing is, when this happens, you know you're talking about a stock. Now, sometimes you end up with bidirectional flows, though not typically. So if you focus on just the elements and the connections, you don't have to worry about the loops, because Kumu will help you with the loops. Once you finish developing the model, you go down here and you say add loop, and then you say detect loops automatically, and Kumu will tell you what the loops are. And when you go here, they won't be labeled, but you can then label them. And by counting the number of adds to same connections, if there are 0 or an even number of them, you know it's a reinforcing structure. And if there are an odd number, then it's a balancing structure. So you go here and you can then go ahead and change the labels of them appropriately. And it will list them, the smallest loops first, getting larger and larger. And before Kumu actually implemented the auto labeling or auto identification of loops, it was a pain, because you end up developing models that look like this, and you labor over it, determining where the loops are. And once Kumu implements auto loop detection, you find out that you don't actually know what all the loops are. Because if you look at this list, you'll see a bunch of these loops which are not labeled. I think there was actually 8 or 9 of them that I didn't know actually existed. And if I mouse over them, it will show them to me, and I know that this is a balancing loop, and this is a reinforcing loop, another reinforcing loop, a reinforcing loop. So I went through and finally revised this model to actually add all the rest of the loops, and it got simply more convoluted. The difficulty is that it displays the loops smallest to largest, but you have to figure out what sequence you want to label them so that it tells the story that the model is meaning to present. So if you'll notice that the first loop is, the smallest loop is labeled 08R as opposed to 01, and then 7 and 1 and 9 and 5. And because of the way this template's set up, because of that set of identifications, I can do this. So I can talk about this, then I can talk about perpetuating poverty, then I can talk about decreased pregnancy, then I can talk about children in orphanages, and I can talk about avoiding births, and I can build out this model piece by piece. And these dots at the bottom are automatically created based upon the way the template is set up. So that once you create the model, you go to the auto loop detection and you sequence the labels. Now, don't expect to get the sequence correct the first time. It's another one of those trial and learning scenarios where you put it together in a way that it seems to make sense. You tell the story to 2 or 3 people and they ask questions, and you realize that it would be better to tell the story in a different way. And so you end up resequencing the element or resequencing the loops to better unfold the story. And you just continue to evolve it until you get to a point where you think that the model depicts the appropriate understanding, and other people seem to connect with it when you tell them the story. So the loops are essential, and once you create the loops, it's also appropriate to write a description of what that loop is intentioned to accomplish. Reinforcing loops essentially promote exponential growth. Balancing loops either seek a goal, or they're stabilizing or stagnating, depending upon the way the influences unfold. So, a few thoughts about loops. Hope you found this of interest. Bye.